here's an image that I made candidly at the celebration of Japan Week on campus here a year ago. And I want you to pay attention to a couple things that I did in the photographing. You noticed I used fairly shallow depth of field because I wanted to be able to isolate the dancer from the background. It just makes it a little bit easier. Now, this excess area here is because I've already formatted this where I want it in the frame on my composite image. So I added some canvas to the frame. So if I look at my image size is roughly a 30 by 20, so to speak. Okay, and so I've got a canvas size that way, but the original was not that dimension, so I added the canvas to it. Image canvas size allows me to change. If I wanted to make that 32 inch, I could add to that canvas that way, but I don't need to. All right, so I've got shallow depth of field, which is going to make it a little bit easier to isolate the subject from the background. I am going to duplicate my layer. Always duplicate the layer before you start selecting. Just always, always, always duplicate your layer before you start selecting and masking, okay? Select and mask under the select menu. And what I like is the old school overlay. This is like the quick mask layer. So it's saying what's being selected will be easily seen when I start to knock out areas of this image. And so if I just start coming in here, it's really like using the quick selection wand under the magic wand. And I will just come in here and it will just grab what it thinks is the subject. And then I can let go of the mouse and just add other areas. And it'll quickly select this for me. I like to unclick and re-click my mouse periodically because I don't like it grabbing too many chunks at a time. But now you can see that it's selected part of the background, and this is a really difficult one because there's gaps in the hair that allows some of the background to show through. So I've got the rough selection. I might come in here a little bit more, get that. Oh, I went too far, but that's okay. Now I'm going to use, this was the quick selection tool. This is the refine edges brush tool. And I like to use what's called a smart radius setting on here that will automatically adjust the radius based upon the area of the image I'm working on. So I'm going to use the refine edges, and it's going to just look at the contrast in the areas that I'm clicking and separate out the subject from the background. And I can get some of these flyaway hairs brought back in to my image. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can see what's going on here. And I'll even go over these areas where there's some translucent background showing through the hair. And see how it's just kind of picking up some of those details. Okay, not going to take a whole lot of time on this today, but you'll get the idea. And then for some reason I missed an eyebrow, so I'm going to go back and get those eyebrows in there with going back to my quick select. It's doing a lot of artificial intelligence calculations, so your computer might slow down a little bit. or in this case, I might be interrupted a little bit with what I'm doing because of an outside application. So I'm just going to get those areas that I missed. And that's pretty good. So I hit OK. Oh, I forgot to do this area down here, so let's clean that up a little bit. Notice I'm using the space bar to quickly grab and manipulate what part of the image I'm looking at. So the space bar turns the cursor into a hand that is a grabber that allows me to move the image. And see here, it selected too much of that, and so I'll come back over this edge here a little bit. Come back and kind of option. Oops. There. So I'd rather have too much selected and then go back to my refine edge. And so now I can just clean up this area right in here. Boom. Okay, now output to a layer mask is what I always use with this select and refine. So I'm outputting to a layer mask. And now you can see, and I have some choices here. Do I really want that stray loose hair right there? Or do I want to give a little bit of a haircut? And I think it's going to be easier. That stray hair, I don't think she would like it. So it would be easier just to take a brush and add black to this layer mask to get rid of this extra hair right here. And that's looking pretty darn good, really. I mean, look at, we've got the little gaps in the fine hairs on the side here. We've got everything selected. So now I'm ready to bring this into my background image, which is this image. I've already created a background for it, and I'll actually show you behind the curtain a little bit on this. I'm going to duplicate this to this, what I'm calling Yumi Dream Composite. Apparently I spelled it compost, but it's meant to be composite. I'm a photographer, not a spelling bee champion. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and go to this composite image here. And I'd previously done this, so here's the new layer that we just put in. And I want you to notice something. I only had an image. This was an image that I made in Hawaii of a bridge in a Chinese garden, stone bridge. It wasn't wide enough for my pattern or for my canvas that I wanted. So I duplicated the layer and moved it over in my canvas, and you can see the seam right there. Right there, you can totally see the seam. But it's okay because I'm going to hide it with my dancer that's going to cover that seam. Boom, just like that. Okay. Some other things that I've done with this image is I've added some texture to this image. So I have these layers that I've previously worked on that are all set to a blend mode of soft light. So I'm just adding texture that just adds a little richness to that image. And then I can go in here and decide whether or not I want to keep that color or whether or not I want to go to Image, Adjust, Hue, Saturation, and pull that saturation down to blend in a little bit more. So we don't see the seam. We have our texture layers on here that just add a little bit of, see what a difference that is? That's just like straight photograph, and that just is adding some texture screens to that image. So again, thinking about how this expands my creative opportunities. When I see a interesting texture, I was in a restaurant and they had a wall that was all roughed up and interesting texture. I'd go with my cell phone and make a photo of that wall and add that to my library as a potential texture that I can add to my image. So now I'm looking at individual elements in the world as potential elements of a new composition down the road. So does this make sense to you? I'm going to turn this off, turn the original back on. You can see kind of I really worked on the color a little bit more. Although it looks like I made pretty much the same decision a little bit, maybe slightly different placement. Move that over a little bit. What are your thoughts about this?
I mean, I think the texture really does bring it together.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really realize how.
It looks like something photograph taken a lot of years ago.
Doesn't it look like it could have been taken like in the early 1900s, like during World War II, right? It has that, and doesn't look like it could be like a postcard image that you would send and write a letter with or something, right? And so what I did is to me, this was a surrealism, right? We've been looking at surrealism. To me, this was like a surreal dream image. And so I went and looked for the Japanese character that represented the meaning of the word dream. And it turns out these characters are called Yumi, is the pronunciation. And Yumi means dream in Japan. And so I actually added the character to the image. Let's see here. Oh, so there was a little area I needed to clean up there in the sky. So I brightened that up. It's always fun to go back and see what you put in there. Yeah, so the character, if I can find which layer that's on. Oh, here it is right here. Okay. So here, let's take a look at this. There. So what I did is with that character, I'm using the darken mode, which means that anything that's white or bright isn't going to affect the background below it, okay? So there's my background, and I'm going dark. So only the pixels that are darker than the background will show up. And I use this all the time. If I want to start with a bright white canvas, and I want to add layers to it, add elements to that canvas, I can go to darken mode, and anything darker than white will show up. If I'm working on a black or a dark canvas and I have something bright to put in that I want to blend in, I will use lighten blend mode, because then only the pixels that are lighter than the background will show through on that layer. And so that's the other trick in compositing that I play with a lot, is using these blend modes of lighten, darken, overlay, and soft light. Those are the 4 blend modes I use all the time when I'm making a composite image. Okay, but you can see the straight image is really boring. In fact, let's go back to, here's the, this would be it in color. All right. There we go. So that's a little more realistic photo, but not as expressive as going with this warm, monochrome, nostalgic. And look at the difference without the texture. It just really added to that expressive, emotional quality of that image. And that's what I love about composite imagery, is that I can put the emotion, I can put the symbolic meaning, and I have total control over the placement of the visual elements within the frame.